Right now with our top story panel that is back with us again tonight, Republican political consultant, the Reverend Joe Watkins, Rachel Maddow from Air America Radio, and constitutional lawyer Michael Gross. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you.
All right. So can you explain this to me tonight, Rachel? So here you've got this group showing the congressional leadership was negligent, but they didn't break any rules.
Right. The congressional leadership was negligent, and it did real harm to the institution of the House, and it posed a present danger to congressional pages. There was all this bad behavior, all these things were wrong, but nobody will be punished. And Dan is exactly right that House Ethics Rule number 13 basically says you have to be good. It's one of these broad rules that says if you don't conduct yourselves in a way that is becoming of this institution, you're breaking a House rule. They definitely could have found people in violation of the rules, and they didn't. I think the Ethics Committee just made a really great case for how impotent and useless they are and why they ought to be abolished and replaced by somebody that doesn't have these guys investigating themselves.
Reverend, you have looked at this case inside out. Don't you even have to concede? It appears as though some rules were broken?
Well, wrong is wrong. There's no doubt about it. What Foley did was awful. It was wrong, and he certainly has paid the price for it by resigning, and he's being investigated.
About the people.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. There were mistakes made. There were people that didn't do what they were supposed to do. Sadly, there are no hard and fast rules that say what the consequences are of not doing your job. You know, it's wrong whenever it happens. Whether Democrats do it or Republicans do it, it's wrong. And Democrats have had the same problems in the 80s, and Republicans had it more recently. But it's wrong whenever it happens.
Don't you think this is a whitewash?
It's not sad that they don't have the rules. That's their intent, not to have the rules. Those rules police themselves. They decide what they can do and what they can't do, and they decide they can do everything. They're incredibly arrogant.
The rules are pretty clear, are they not?
No, they're not. The
rules.
Don't
think it's the interpretation of the rules?
No. It's exactly like high crimes and misdemeanors. It's whatever they say it is. You can't do what's inappropriate. How about after they learn in Buffalo, Reynolds is told that Foley down in Florida is singing love songs at night outside the page's room while he's falling on the floor drunk, that Reynolds takes care of it, and a $100,000 campaign contribution comes from a guy in Florida in the Foley camp up to the Reynolds Congressional campaign. Will you tell me that's not a payoff? Did anybody look into that? This is serious corruption, and these people cannot police themselves. No can anybody police themselves. Somebody outside the group has to.
So if someone's not going to take a fall in a significant way, how about sending some sort of ethical message through censure?
Yeah,
well, this is not going to be terrible.
That's been done before. I mean, Jerry Studs was censured, and he stayed in Congress for another 13 years after he was censored.
But do you think anybody in the House leadership should be censured for allowing this to go on when, in fact, they were notified about the content of these emails and they knew that some of these pages were allegedly being preyed upon?
Congress is a work environment. Those pages are essentially interns in the work environment. The boss found out that somebody was behaving very inappropriately toward the interns and let it go. The boss ought to be in trouble.
It was a cover-up. It was an intentional cover-up. Come on. It was an election year, and all they release is what they're going to release against the opposite party. They don't release anything that can possibly hurt their own party. A Republican-controlled Congress was not going to release bad behavior by a Republican congressman running for re-election.
Democrats knew about it too. Let's face it, Democrats knew about it early.
All right, one of the problems with corruption is I'll hide your story, you hide mine. So I'm sure there was a lot of that going on.
To me, they all saying with a straight face that those Democrats who found out about it bear the same blame as folks in the House leadership.
Well, it ought not be used politically for political gain. At the end of the day, think about it. The pages are our kids. They're young people who are working on Capitol Hill, who are gaining experience, and have
a right to be safe.
Absolutely. And so, anytime that trust is violated, somebody ought to be penalized for it.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
And in this case, it ought to have been the boss. It ought to have been the leadership.
It's not about Foley. It's about the cover-up. It's about the cover-up of any wrongdoing. That is corruptive. And the reason that happens is they're doing it to help somebody.
I think it was just negligence. I think what it was is that they get 1,000 complaints a day. Right. This was one of many complaints.
You don't get 1,000 complaints a day that there's a
Florida, I'd like to say.
I guess what? They don't call it negligence. They call it willful negligence. All right, Reverend Joe Watkins, Rachel Maddow, Michael Gross. Thanks. We're going to see you all again. We're going to go straight back to tonight's top story panel. Republican American political consultant, the Reverend Joe Watkins, Rachel Maddow from Air America Radio, and constitutional lawyer Michael Gross. So what message does this send to the American public that somehow it was acceptable to have members of Congress who are making 3 or 4 times what the average working person is in America, taking those long breaks at holiday times and averaging, 48 hours of work during the week?
Well, it's always a little bit tricky.
I didn't ask you, I asked Michael. Don't jump in. Oh boy, I've never cut a reverend off before. I'm sorry, sir.
There's a special circle in hell for people who cut off reverends.
Thank you for giving me a chance, because I need it. It's not about the service. If you're getting lousy service, you don't want more of it. It's about the quality of the service, and it stinks. And it's not just that it is negligent or sloppy, it is corruptive.
So wait, are you saying these people who were working on average 3 days a week were compromised because of the quality of the work and the number of hours put in are irrelevant?
There's one issue which we're dancing around here. There is a word that we don't use, bribery. Instead, we use campaign contributions, we use lobbyists, we use trips, we use study groups, we use speaking fees, we use all kinds of ways, euphemisms for bribes. You are beholden to people who put you in office. They're doing it in order to get paid back. And when you do that, it's not just that you pay them back, you steal it from the people who don't serve.
Wait a minute. What does that have to do with the short work week?
I don't think it has anything to do with the short work week.
The point is there's nothing wrong with coming to Congress 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days. I don't want them there 5 days. I'd rather have them not at all. What they're doing is a disservice to the country, not because they're not there long enough, but because they're cheating us.
It's not fair to broad brush Congress and say every member of Congress is not doing his or her job. That's not true. A lot of hardworking people in Congress on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, who take their job very seriously and work very hard.
You're not too happy with the results of this last Congress, Reverend.
Well, no. I mean, the last Congress could have gotten more done.
Could have gotten more done?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And maybe the additional working days will help get that done, because at least it says that maybe, but not necessarily. Because remember now, I mean, a lot of these hardworking people who were spending those days outside of Congress were spending the time in their home districts, working and doing things.
I heard a very interesting argument today where a Republican was saying this is just like the Democrats to force us into a 5-day work week in the city. They hate families.
Right. Exactly. Now listen, it wasn't interesting.
It
wasn't Mr. Smith goes to the district office. It was Mr. Smith goes to Washington. We hire these people to be members of Congress. Being a member of Congress means showing up at Congress. You can't expect anybody to have sympathy for them arguing for their 3-day work week. We don't need to build in incentives for them to have more time with their constituents. Every 2 years, it's their constituents in their home districts who decide whether or not to send them back. They've got plenty of reason to pay attention to their constituents.
Is there no value in going home, back to the home district?
There's lots of value. You've
You've
got people who have all kinds of problems. I work for a U.S. Senator. I know the constituent problems that people have, and they're all kinds. And these are regular people, not contributors.
Can't you do that work on the phone?
Huh? Yeah. You can do it on the phone, but it's nice to do it in person. People like to see the folks that they elect. They like to see the folks that they elect. It's good for them to see the folks that they elect in person.
Try calling if you haven't made a contribution and see if you get your phone call answered. Don't you think there's a relationship between the first story we talked about, the Foley scandal, which is not Foley's problem, but the problem of everybody covering up misbehavior of congressmen, and this issue, which is why aren't they working? Because they're not there for that purpose. They're not there to serve us. They're there to serve the people who paid for their campaigns.
Quick closing thought.
Let's see what the Democrats get done. They have control of the House and the Senate. Let's see if the 5-day working week actually results in more legislation passed. Americans have a very, very, very short patience with Congress.
Will they accomplish what they're setting out to do?
They're actually going to work in January for the first time in my lifetime. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Let's see what they do if they don't have campaign contributors.
Oh, well, that could be very interesting.
Well, they couldn't even get McCain-Feingold passed bipartisan.
We got to move along. Reverend Joe Watkins, Rachel Maddow, Michael Gross. See you again in a little bit. We're going to move on to